The NBA has seen many great athletes, some lasting a long time in the league, and others not so long. This longevity is something that is talked about all the time, and is something I value in a player's career. But as of 2021, nobody has been able to statistically show these great athletes' primes and the impact they've had on the league. That's why I'm going to list the best NBA player from each year, acknowledge the runner-ups, and tally up the results. This video is going to be extremely controversial. There will only be a few people that completely agree with every take I make in this video, but that's okay. You will probably disagree with a few of the years, so if you do, let me know in the comments. I will reply to any of the constructive ones. Also, we are going to start at the 1969/70 NBA season because the years prior were completely dominated by Wilt, Russell, and Robertson. And I am ranking the best player in the league mostly based on statistics for the regular season and playoffs. The stats shown beside each player is regular season, but I do take into account playoffs. I just didn't display it. Awards the players accumulated are notable in my decision making, but I would say statistics account for around 70% of my rankings. And finally, this is a two-part series, so in today's video, we will go over 1970 all the way to 1995, and in the second part, we'll be going over 1996 to 2021. But before we get into this video, it would be awesome if you could check to see if you're subscribed to my YouTube channel. It's completely free, takes 1 second to do, and it really helps my channel grow. According to YouTube statistics, less than -69% of my viewers are actually subscribed, so I would really appreciate it if you would click that big red button. Also, if you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like rating on the video as it'll promote it to even more people. With that out of the way, let's get right into the video. Starting off in the 1969-70 season, I got Jerry West as the best player in the league. He was the points per game leader, win share leader, and had an overall fantastic stat line to back it up. For the runner-up, I've got rookie Kareem. For 1971, I got Kareem taking over the number 1 spot. Kareem averaged 32 and 16, was the MVP, won the NBA championship, was the points per game leader, and the win share leader. You basically couldn't do any better. For the runner-up, I got Jerry West in 1971. In 1972, I have Kareem carrying over his title as the best player in the world. The man got even better this year. I know he didn't win an NBA championship, but man, he just completely dominated. He averaged 34.8 points, 16.6 rebounds, and 4.6 assists, was the MVP, points per game leader, and the win shares leader. And for the runner-up, I have Wilt Chamberlain, who actually blossomed in his final few years, and he was a force to be reckoned with in the post during 72-73 seasons. Speaking of 1973, I have Kareem as the best player in the world once again. The man averaged 30.2 points, 16.1 rebounds, and 5 assists, and he was the win shares leader. Win shares is arguably the most important stat, and it basically takes everything into consideration of what the player did, and gives them a rating on how many wins they would have accumulated for their team over the season. So that's why win shares is so important, and I usually include it in my displaying of the statistics. As for the runner-ups this year, I have Wilt Chamberlain once again, and the points per game leader, Tiny Archibald. In 1974, I have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar another time, averaging 27 points, 14.5 rebounds, and 4.8 assists. This year he was the MVP and the win shares leader. And for the runner-ups, I have nobody because, in all honesty, nobody could compete with Kareem in 1974. You could argue that 1974 wasn't as good as his previous years statistically, but this year, for some reason, most of the best players had lower statistics, but Kareem was still a standout, and I have no runner-up for 1974. In 1975, Kareem's final year with the Bucks, he is still the best player in the world. He averaged 30 points, 14 rebounds, and 4.1 assists. And for the runner-up, I have Bob McAdoo. Bob McAdoo was a great player in the 70s, but still wasn't quite as good as Kareem. And in 1976, I have Kareem once again This time on his new team, the Lakers, he averaged 27.7 points, almost 17 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. Man, this guy was a beast. He was the MVP, the rebounds per game leader, and the win shares leader. Absolutely dominant. And for the runner-up, I have Bob McAdoo once again. And in 1977, we got Kareem once again. This man just completely dominated the 70s. He averaged 26.2 points, which was a step down from the previous season, 13.3 rebounds, and 3.9 assists. The man was still dominant this year. He was the MVP and the win shares leader. However, the runner-up, Julius Erving, actually has a case, and if you put Dr. J as the best player in the world this season, I couldn't really argue with you too much. In 1978, can you guess the best player in the world? Yes, it's Kareem once again on the Lakers. The man averaged 25.8 points, 12.9 assists, and 4.3 rebounds. Kareem was still extremely dominant this year, and the only player that I could think of that maybe had a chance to surpass him was Bill Walton, but still, Kareem was absolutely dominant. In 1979 though, Kareem finally gets surpassed by Moses Malone himself. Moses had a great season in 1979, but this is still really close. You could still say Kareem was a better player, but man, Moses Malone makes a very good case to overtake him. Moses Malone averaged 24.8 points per game, 17.6 rebounds, was the MVP and the rebounds per game leader. This man was completely dominant. He didn't have a championship to back it up, but still, absolutely dominant. And in 1980, I have Kareem retaking his spot. Just like last season, this was a close one. But also this season, I have two runner-ups, George Gervin and Moses Malone. Both of these guys have a case, but I still have Kareem as he was the champion and the win shares leader and the MVP. That's a lot of accolades that these other guys just didn't have. You could argue statistically that Moses Malone was better, but overall I'd say Kareem had the better year. And in 1981, I have Moses Malone taking his second year with the crown. This year Moses was absolutely dominant, arguably his best season ever. The man averaged almost 28 points per game, 15 rebounds, and sure, 2 assists, but this guy was absolutely dominant. He was the MVP and the rebounds per game leader. And for the runner-ups, I have Dr. J himself, and of course Kareem. He's always going to be in that conversation. In 1982, I have Moses Malone once again as the best player in the world. Moses doesn't really get the credit he deserves when people talk about the all-time greats. The man was an absolute monster in the paint, and he was the rebounds per game leader for many years, and he had the points to back it up. This season, he averaged over 31 points per game, almost 15 rebounds, was the MVP and the win shares leader. That's very formidable, and without a doubt, he was the best player in the world. But if I had to choose two runner-ups, it would be Dr. J and George Gervin. Unfortunately, in this list, Dr. J never really gets the spot as number one. You could argue it in the years I put him as runner-up, and honestly, I wouldn't really have anything too bad to say about that. But I just didn't think Dr. J was quite good enough at this point in his career. And in 1983, I have Moses Malone once again, but this time in his stint with Philly. He was the NBA champion this year and the MVP, and sure, his stats didn't really back it up like in the previous seasons, but the man had to sacrifice in order to win a chip, and for that, I respect him. And for the runner-ups, I have Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. These two guys were just babies, but they were still formidable, and I have to mention them as a runner-up. And in 1984, coming into his own, I have Larry Bird as the best player in the world. He was the NBA champion and the NBA MVP, so I think without a doubt in 1984, Larry was the best in the world. He averaged 24, 10, and almost 7 assists per game. That's pretty great for a guy who's coming into one of his first seasons. For the runner-up, I have Magic Johnson. In this list, Larry Bird ends up racking up more best players in the world than Magic, and it just kind of ends up like that because Larry Bird, at the start, was a little bit better than Magic, admittedly, but by the end of his career, he started to have back issues and Magic took over. But once Magic started taking over, then MJ came about. So unfortunately, Magic's timing just wasn't quite as good as Larry's, but at the end of the day, these two guys are just as good as each other. but they were at their prime at different points in their career. So at this point in their careers, Larry was the best. And in 1985, I have Larry Bird once again. This time he wasn't a champion, but the man's stats were even better, averaging almost 29 points, almost 11 rebounds, and 7 assists. He was the MVP and the win shares leader. And that's all the confirmation I need to put Larry as the best in the world. And this season, I have baby Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson as the runner-ups. And in 1986, I have Larry Bird once again as the best player in the world. I was going to put Magic in this year. It's very, very close. But Larry Bird did win the championship and was the NBA MVP. And those are arguably the two biggest awards. Not to mention he was the win shares leader. So his impact on the floor is definitely backed up by the stats. He averaged an impressive stat line of 26, 10, and 7. And man, Larry was completely dominant. For the runner-ups though, if you put Magic as better this year, I can't really argue with you too much. The only thing against Magic is he wasn't the champion. And obviously the MVP is huge for Larry. And also Michael Jordan is a runner-up. As soon as Michael Jordan was in the league, he arguably was the best player in the world. But I still have Larry Bird in 1986. And in 1987, the man finally gets his spotlight. I have Magic Johnson as the best in the world, finally surpassing Larry Bird, who now has back issues. And in 1987, Magic averaged an impressive stat line of 24, 6, and 12. He was the NBA champion this year, and he was the MVP. This is very impressive for Magic. And for the runner-up, I have Michael Jordan, who would soon take over the league. And in 1988, yes, you guessed it, Michael Jordan is the best player in the world. This man was completely out of his mind this season, averaging 35 points, almost 6 rebounds, and 6 assists per game. He was the MVP, and without a doubt the points per game leader. And for the runner-ups this season, I have Magic once again, and Charles Barkley, who is starting to come into his own. And in 1989, I have Michael Jordan once again. At this point in the NBA, Michael Jordan was obviously the best player in the world, and his stint with the Bulls just completely dominated the entire league. This year he averaged almost 33 points, 8 assists, and 8 rebounds per game. He was the win shares leader and the points per game leader. Sure, he hadn't had a championship at this point in his career, but that would be soon to come. And for the runner-ups, I have Charles Barkley and Magic Johnson once again. This year, Charles was actually pretty formidable, but I still think Michael Jordan was without a doubt the best player in the world, and I don't think too many people would attest to that. And in 1990, I have Michael Jeffrey Jordan once again. This guy was so dominant, and he's going to completely fill up the 90s as expected. This year he averaged almost 34 points per game, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists. He was the win shares leader and the points per game leader. Like I said last year, he wasn't an NBA champion yet, and many people had doubts about him, thinking that he carried the load too much and was too much of a ball hog. But as we all know, in the coming seasons, he would prove that he can be a proven champion. And for the runner-ups, we got Charles and Magic once again. These guys just weren't quite good enough to surpass MJ. And in 1991, we got Michael Jordan again, winning his first NBA championship with the Chicago Bulls. He was also the points per game leader this year, and the win shares leader, admittedly. He averaged 32 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists. Absolute dominance from Michael Jordan. For the runner-ups, I have Karl Malone and David Robinson. You could argue these guys, I guess, but I think without a doubt it's Michael Jordan. And in 1992, I have Michael Jordan, obviously. No runner-ups whatsoever. MJ was so dominant in these seasons, it's hard to really argue anyone as good as him. He averaged 36 and 6, was the NBA champion for the second straight season, and was the points per game leader. This guy was just so dominant, it's insane. In 1993, once again we got Michael Jordan with his first three-peat. He still did absurd things. He's points per game leader like always, averaging 33, 7, and 6. For the runner-ups this season, I have Charles Barkley and Hakeem Olajuwon, who is actually pretty formidable, and you could actually argue that Hakeem was better than MJ this season, but just not quite good enough in my opinion. In 1994 though, Hakeem finally takes over as Michael Jordan took that leave of absence after his father died. Hakeem was very dominant in these years, without the Bulls being really that much of a competitor. Sure, they had Scottie Pippen in the squad, but they weren't quite good enough to beat the Rockets. Hakeem was so dominant in these years, averaging 27, 12, and 4. In 1994, Hakeem was the NBA champion and the NBA MVP, so there's no doubting that Hakeem was the best player in the world. And in 1995, I have Hakeem once again, the two-time NBA champion. Hakeem was so dominant, averaging 28, 11, and 4. Man, Hakeem really dominated in these years, but there were still some runner-ups in these 2 years. David Robinson, Scottie Pippen, and Shaq all have a case for being the best in the world, but at the end of the day, the Rockets won because Hakeem was the best. But that's all for part 1. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to stay tuned for part 2 as I go over years 1996 to the current year 2021. This list took a long time to make. Approximately it will take each video around 5 hours to make, so I would really appreciate if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel if you like basketball content. I post weekly on this channel, so I'd love to see you guys hop along for the journey. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, as it will recommend my video to even more people. And as I said earlier, comment down below if you disagree with any of these players. Honestly, I'd love to see what you guys have to say. Just please be constructive. And with that out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching. This is Smitty, signing off.
Check it.